Welcome to the Upstate CFO Council. This organization was founded in 2019 by Robert Bendetti in order to provide a networking and educational forum for senior financial executives to share best practices, to discuss current financial issues, and to learn about current topics related to the performance of their job.
Brian Anderson, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can. Good morning.
All right, so did Brian Jeppy tell you my little shtick about how I introduce the speakers?
No, he did not.
Excellent. So what I do is I find stuff on the internet about you and then I reveal it to the audience before you speak. Normally I do a pretty deep dive, I mean, if we're being honest, but you're not here. So it's less fun for me to make you feel uncomfortable since you're not in my presence. So I have not done a deep dive, but I found some stuff, so I'm still going to share it. I'll introduce you a little bit. First, Brian Jeppy, Executive Director. I found a couple things about you I think are true. First of all, like your life revolves around golf. That's factual. Serious. You're like a super active complainer on Twitter about all things sports. Yeah, factual. Unless you're complaining about Furman and whatever egregious thing has occurred with Furman sports. So if you're big into Furman, you need to follow Brian on Twitter. Brian Anderson, Executive Director at JP Morgan Chase. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
I think, and I want to know what this, you got an associate's degree in business and in agriculture and technology from the State University of New York. Is that correct?
I did go to, yes, it was at an agricultural school, so it ended up being in business, but I did start my college career as a horse trainer and breeder.
Nice. Then, as one would go into human resources, bachelor's degree in human resources from Pace University, is that correct?
And that is correct.
And then an MBA in finance from, I can't even read my own handwriting here, Rensselaer Polytech.
Correct, RPI, up in New York.
I think these are the things I think here. I think they're true. And this, married 4 kids, is that correct?
That's true.
Whew.
That's correct.
That's so. I feel so uncomfortable when I say that in case I'm ever wrong. And then super active in your church, super community volunteer, and I think at least most, if not all of those kids were in sports and you were an active youth coach. Is that correct, sir?
That is correct.
All right, I'm going to stop there and I'm going to yield the floor to you. I'm going to mute us. By the way, this is being recorded, all right? And so don't say anything crazy, y'all. And Brian, just a heads up, this is recorded. Please start. I'm going to mute us just for background noise, and when you get to the end for Q&A, I'll unmute us.
Okay, terrific, great. Well, again, good morning, everyone. Apologies I can't be there in person with you and take part in the breakfast that you're having this morning, but certainly appreciative to have the time just to talk a little bit about the payment space, the landscape. When Brian asked me to give a talk around what's happening in payments, we used to always talk about it as, well, the future of payments, where are we heading? And there's just so much that's happening within the payment space. What I hope to do this morning is to be able to hit on a few different aspects of what we're seeing and what's happening around payments in general. And rather than talking about the future of payments, we're really looking at it as it's fast forward payments. We've really hit the fast forward button when it comes to the payments, both from an inbound side and an outbound side from that perspective. So when we think about the evolution, yesterday, where our payments were, when we think about the AP process, it's or AR process, it's a batch processing. Fixed operational procedures, select times of the week that you would run your payments or be able to receive things in. Transparency was very low. You could have select intraday reporting. A lot of it was based on previous day reporting when you're working through to do your reconciliation, and then certain limited hours and limited days. When you think about payments coming in or going out, you're Monday through Friday. You had windows of when a payment could actually get transacted. If you're doing a wire, which was our most kind of immediate term of payment, you're still limited, to the Fed window hours from that standpoint. So for those of us on the East Coast, not really a big deal, but as you go west, it becomes, even more constrained for companies. When we think about where we are today, API application programming interface has come into play. For real-time processing, companies are embedding it into their payments and reporting processes and really making microservices out of it. Blockchain has come for removing friction in global payments, setting up intelligent contracts, security, and certainly the overall 24/7 availability of payment processing and near immediate use of funds and availability of funds has come to the forefront. And then when we hit the fast forward button, and again, as I mentioned, he's mentioned it as fast forward because the pace of change and the acceleration has really hit that fast forward indication. In 2018, 2019, when I would talk about the future of payments, where we're heading, I'd say, well, in 2025 or the next 7 to 10 years. And reality is, the barriers to entry, have come down. The global pandemic has forced companies to accelerate their move to electronic, and I'll talk a little bit about, touchless, as well. Embedded payments are becoming the norm. Internet of Things, or IoT, is no longer a concept when it comes to contextualized payments or having the payments built in within the process. And so that growing 24/7 frictionless payment network continues to expand from that front. So certainly acceleration of change. I'm sure many of you are seeing that within your businesses today. I do want to hit a little bit around trends. So I'll talk a little bit about the consumer to business, business to consumer trends that we're seeing, and then some of our B2B trends as well. So from a consumer to business, business to consumer, cashierless tech has arrived. You think about the buying process. It used to be, it started off as a 3-step process. So back in the ancient times, you'd go and have the store clerk procure your goods. You would pick it up, you would buy it, you would leave. We're moving to a 2-step process where basically you go in, you can prepay, pick up your goods and leave, and then companies are even getting into facial recognition from that standpoint as well. So cashierless tech is no longer a concept that really has arrived, and we're starting to see that come to the forefront. I did mention a little bit about faster payments, kind of where we are today. The instant payment services like Zelle really raised the question as to why can't every payment be this quick and easy? You think about gig economy drivers; they expect to be paid at the end of their ride. Insurance claimants expect their immediate payout of their claim. Small businesses want access to their funds immediately on the same day as the sale. And so when you think about some of the rails around the faster payment, so push to card, so you're pushing a payment to a consumer's debit card, really reaches about 99% of the U.S. market from that standpoint. Real-time payments, we're going to be approaching our 4-year anniversary with real-time payments here in the U.S. It reaches about 60% of the DDAs, across the U.S. And as I mentioned, it's not just about consumers, but and small businesses. A lot of our larger corporations are looking at how do they build in this faster payment method as not only from a resiliency standpoint, but also thinking about their working capital strategy for larger suppliers. Subscriptions to recurring revenue models, relationships continue to advance. You think about the subscription was a static fixed, you kind of pay it annually, go through. Recurring revenue is more variable, it's on demand. And while these revenue models can be challenging to implement, the benefits room through that deep recurring relationship, through the data that can be fed back into your product and marketing teams, really personalizing that consumer experience with tailored offerings, is where we're seeing the market move to. Certainly, as we look to try to simplify payments, our legacy systems weren't built for e-commerce or omni-channel, demand, during the pandemic. So a lot of companies are turning to integrated solutions, working with their ERP providers or their CRM providers, looking with different e-commerce platforms to be able to leverage, API and move beyond payments into their balance, transaction reporting, reconciliation, and again, that data mining, aspect of it as well. Just a side note on that payment simplified and thinking about our legacy system. So when we implemented, JP Morgan implemented, real-time payments back in 2017, there were some 75 downstream systems that we had to work to update into a real-time environment. Real-time payments is operating 24/7. You got, 15 seconds to be able to get everything through. Historically, as I mentioned, everything was built on batch processing. And so there was a significant amount of, investment that needed to be made to bring us into, the environment we are today. Certainly, as we look at, the advancement of payments, at the speed of payments, the fraudsters, they don't sleep. They're relentless. We like to say we need to be right 100% of the time. The fraudster only needs to be right, one time from that standpoint. So the fraudulent attacks, they're growing in sophistication and frequency. The AFP survey, this year, 81% of companies had said, they had been targeted for payment fraud in some form or fashion. And so companies are taking a multi-layer approach using, artificial intelligence-based strategies, leveraging data collection, so having a registered checkout versus a guest checkout, account validation as we move through. And then certainly the biggest thing is your cybersecurity education and awareness. You're only as good as your weakest employee. And I think, companies, overall have been made a significant investment into educating and, making their employees aware of their role in protecting the security within your companies. Payments in context, sometimes called contextual payments experiences, as we think about through smart devices, moving into vehicles, social media, streaming, smart speakers. You can, say to your smart speaker, to purchase or order whatever you need, and it all happens. It's all, the payment is all built within the process. Even virtual reality, environments as well. And then, the last trend I'll talk about, and then, you mentioned around COVID, customer-centric and seamless payments. How do we remove that friction within the payment? Think about the checkout process, the tap and go. If you have a digital wallet on your mobile device, and it could be as simple as putting a pay button in your email quote. Gas stations are getting involved in this. Up here in the Northeast, we have a gas station chain called Cumberland Farms, or referred to as Cumbies, if anyone's from the Northeast. I can now use, the app on my phone. I just open it up and pay for my gas right there. I don't have to swipe a card. I don't have to insert a card. I don't have to go inside. I get 10 cents off a gallon, by doing it. And I'll actually go to a Cumberland Farms or something else because of that feature. And so, as companies think about, how can they drive that loyalty and that behavior and really make it a seamless process? Because sometimes making the payment is the greatest friction within your process and integrating, either paying out to a consumer or an individual or receiving those funds in. And then certainly, what happens after COVID? We have seen a tremendous growth, a tremendous pace, happening, from the, as a result of COVID, moving to a touchless environment. I flew to Atlanta last week to go to, my daughter was getting married over in Birmingham, and when I went to Avis to pick up my car, I just had a QR code. I didn't speak to one single person. I just walked out, got into the vehicle, drove out, scanned the QR code, and was on my way to Birmingham. And so we think about, the curbside pickup, or they call it BOPIS or BOPIS, which is buy online, pick up in store, continues to have grown significantly over the last year. And, we largely see that is going to continue beyond where we are today. And a recent survey said 56% of consumers expect to continue to engage online with merchants and service providers after COVID, just because of the convenience process that has, come into play. But not only, so that on the B2B, they have seen continued, trends, moving through, and how do, in the pandemic, really helped accelerate this, because as we all went, majority of companies went to work from home, you were no longer able to get in and print your checks and mail your checks to your suppliers. If you're a supplier and you didn't have a virtual solution or outsourced solution, you weren't able to get to the office to pick up the checks that were being mailed to you. And so we started to see a significant growth around companies being open to accept virtual card payments, and be able to have that immediacy of payment coming in, not having to process the check, worry about the check coming through from that standpoint. And so from a business to business perspective, we saw a continued trend towards digitization of their payments. They're looking to how to continue to implement electronic invoicing solutions. Again, moving out of that paper, needing not needing to be in a physical location to be able to see your invoicing or get your invoices out the door. And then certainly, as we think about us as consumers, we're getting used to the tap and go, the mobile devices, the mobile wallets. Our employees and those within our companies, they want that from a business perspective as well. And so we're seeing companies expand their uses of mobile wallet, getting consumers, sending payments directly to a mobile wallet for a consumer to use or an employee to use. If you have an infrequent traveler, just sending them a temporary virtual card that they can use in their wallet to go to a conference. And then, as I mentioned, companies continue to be targeted on the cyber side as well. Not only from a consumer business perspective, but we're seeing a lot of that in the B2B front as we think about business email compromise, as fraudsters try to interject themselves within the payment aspect of your supply chain. So there continues to be the rigorous behavior that we're all providing to try to prevent and stop those fraudsters from getting into our payment flows. And so when we think about 25 years ago, the internet, there were a lot of barriers to entry. You had to have a phone line, you had to go and buy a modem, you had to get a disk. It was really slow, and people weren't sure if it was going to survive. And then once those barriers were brought down, you look at all the different businesses that have come to light as a result of that, how we conduct our business, and just the growth and how much it drives within our economy. That's what we're seeing today as we move in with payments. And so artificial intelligence, while it's been around for a long time, and artificial intelligence is the simulation of human intelligence in machines programmed to think like humans and mimic their actions, has continued to advance and come to the forefront as we think about it within fraud detection, or being able to handle simple routine requests or processes to come through. Blockchain largely came to the forefront and made popular because of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin running on it, but it's a distributed ledger system that records those transactions, and those transactions are maintained across several computers that are linked to a peer-to-peer network. And we're seeing business and use cases beyond just the money movement, thinking about smart contracts, access to data, data storage, being able to take out frictions within processes. Blockchain has really come to the forefront and beyond just the cryptocurrency aspect of it as well. API, again, another term that's starting to, when you think about application programming interface. It's really, essentially, it's an interface between protocol between two computer programs that allows them to be able to communicate in near real time and be able to connect to each other. It's in our everyday life now. Not everyone is out building. A great common example is if you're looking for a home and you're on Zillow and you want to map to it. Zillow doesn't have their own mapping devices. They're using an API to map into Google from that standpoint. 5G, it's not just for better streaming technology on your phone. So we've moved from 3G to 4G to LTE, and now 5G. Really, this fifth generation of wireless technology for cellular networks, deployed a couple years ago, really allowed for data to be transmitted fast and efficiently through the wireless network. And so as you think about driverless cars and being able to use 5G 5G to know and detect, people on the road or detect the roadways. And as we just look at that data consumption and being able to transport data, 5G is pretty imperative, to that. Quantum computing, so essentially, this is the ability to be able to use and solve complex problems with data insight. There's people a lot smarter than me in the room, but when you think about computers, they always use, like, from a data set, you use ones or zeros, and quantum computing, brings in what's called qubits, which allows you to be able to crunch data, solve complex problems, either theoretically or physically, to work through and just further, utilize that data and that analysis to drive trends, understand, where you need to move your business to from that standpoint. And then finally, the Internet of Things. Was a relatively new term over the last couple of years. It's like, great, my fridge can order, tell me when I'm low on milk, or I can use my Bluetooth device to start my crock pot from that standpoint. But it's really moved beyond, that, and now integrated in with payments. And as we think about, not only our apps, our cars, everything within our house, smart speakers, just continues to, create that network without human-to-human, interaction from that standpoint. So that acceleration, and just kind of a recap, where we are, and I'll hit on this. I'll cover a real-world example, and then I do want to spend a little bit around, ESG, as that's, coming to the forefront as well. So when we think about where we are today, we have a better user experience. Companies are investing in tech debt. So you think like PayPal, Venmo, Square, Zelle. They're investing in that debt, but they still run on traditional rails. They're still moving payments through ACH, or they're moving it through, through real-time payments. When we think about payday and our employees, a lot of us are paid either on a weekly or a bi-monthly, basis via direct deposit. Our point of sales are static. Consumers pay with cash and cards. A lot of companies still leveraging, paper and fax, to manage their business. And then, from a banking services bill payment, clients are using, the regular traditional bill payment services through banks. And kind of where we are, and moving forward, we talked a little bit about the payment ecosystems, and how, they can, be able to be built in as part of not just a one-stop shop, but fully integrated, and to shift payments. So, employees are paid, they're going to be paid by, faster via debit card networks through early wage access. It's no longer going to be your traditional, static, payday from that standpoint. Consumers have moved to the mobile for the, point of sale. QR codes, near field communication. Businesses are implementing corporate cards into their payment platforms, to not only gain, from a revenue perspective, but also as a working capital tool as well. And then, certainly mobile payments continues to grow, and gain momentum, around even from a bill payment, perspective as well. And then as we hit that fast forward button, as we think about the new infrastructure that's coming into play, I talked about the 5G, the blockchain. How do you move out of the traditional, old brick and mortar or old banking networks to really break down those barriers and improve the seamlessness of payments? Single account, employees get paid, into interoperable accounts, and so it's no longer just, one stop shopping for them, or placement for them. And then, do we eventually move away from a point of sale system? We talked about, and for any of those that have those, there's an expense and there's a process to go through and roll out and upgrade. And, so do we get to the point where it's just facial recognition? We're working through, from that standpoint. Certainly, from a business perspective, ACH will continue to grow. We're seeing continued growth on it. It's hard to believe it's been around for over, probably 45 years. And the amount of checks that are still within our system, but we'll, as we hit the fast forward, as companies get used to electronification, we'll continue to see that rise within ACH. And then, micropayments, basically as customers use it, the users pay for usage of time, and really shifting the trend to use from actual ownership as well. So we'll continue to see hitting, advancements coming through. I know, as I mentioned, I no longer want to talk about it as 2025. It probably, some of these things are 2021 and 2022. So a real-world example here, and connected cars are driving the revolution. Their ability to transact and send data on demand 24/7. And as we think about the connected cars, and we had an announcement a few weeks back where we invested, bought a 75% stake into the VW payments business. So for VW, Audi, and the German cars, where the payment system, the integration within your vehicle it's here. It's real world. And when we think about, how cars can help drive our digital revolution, you have your buying experience. So you can buy your cars, digitally. You can buy them online. It's simple 24/7, availability. Your car, as I mentioned, becomes your digital wallet on wheels. You can use your car to buy your Starbucks or your Dunkin', or from an e-marketplace perspective, as you're driving by a Best Buy, you get contextual marketing. You're served. You see, the TV's on sale. Click on your screen. You've bought it and enabled, and it's going to show up at your house when you come home. Certainly the monetization, source. So you think about insurance, and moving to data as a tech, as the car becomes further integrated and communicating with other aspects of where you get engaged with. We'll continue to see, how companies are able to monetize that data source. And then certainly, mobility as a service. So shift from a usership model, shift to a usership model from that ownership model. Pay for the time that you actually use the vehicle, which can also drive to, recurring revenue model, and you can adjust to, assess your customers' expectations as well. So we're starting to see a lot of this come to the front, and more of it will come through as, companies look to figure out, all right, how do we leverage the data that's out there? How are we marketing? And then what does it mean from a payment perspective? And what does it mean from our business-to-business relationships as we think about our suppliers, our networks, our interactions? We're really starting to see that growth come through. So the last few minutes that I want to spend here this morning is really talking about ESG adoption and what we're seeing with trends from that standpoint. So, ESG, environmental, social, governance is, we're really looking at a set of qualitative and quantitative standards, that outline key elements for transition to a more sustainable world. Environmentally, how are we reducing our impact on climate change or carbon output? Socially, how are we promoting global diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then the governance of that. How are these, aligned to the goals, and how are we tracking, against those as companies? And, it's a mainstream topic that we're starting to see more through. Our clients are bringing it up. Companies are recognizing that it impacts their reputation, it impacts their bottom line. And, as we look at, why it's important, 72% of the Fortune 500 companies have outlined their ESG strategy. Global bond issuance has increased, 49%. We're going to exceed 1 trillion in global bond issuance, green bond issuance, this year. And just as you think about the policies being implemented around globally, around the largest companies as well, and as we look at net zero targets by between 2030 and 2050, so all of these things, as we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, as we think about how do we reduce our carbon footprint, what are things that we can do, and it goes beyond there's certainly reputational impact. How are you measuring it? How are you contributing to it? And the reason why I bring it up to here is the CFOs, treasurers. You sit at the hub of it all and can really help drive that from the position where you sit in, from that standpoint. You really have the opportunity to embed ESG into your core mandate. You think about the activities of a treasurer or a CFO, you sit at the nexus of so much within your company, across borrowing, across cash management, across as you think about your payment strategies, your risk analysis, as you think about your working capital, management, from that standpoint. And so, companies are integrating ESG into their corporate lending activities. They're looking at, ESG revolving, credit facilities. They're looking at green bonds. They're looking at sustainable supply chain finance. So, for their suppliers, who are they buying from? What is their setup? How can they help promote and drive, the ESG mandate? Certainly, reducing carbon footprint, all the electronification stuff that I just talked about, so moving away from checks and paper invoices into the digital environment, and as we think about the ESG mandate, it's expected to significantly grow into that flow across payment activities, across liquidity, across merchant services, and into the future. And so, really the opportunity as we think about what this can mean for our world from a global perspective. All of us here do kind of sit at a great nexus of that, to be able to help drive that. Think about our policies, think about KPIs around that. How do we want to track? How do we want to measure it, to be able to help drive that mandate forward? And so that I just again that concludes my formal talking points for this morning. I know I threw a lot at you over the phone or over the video here, but just was hopefully trying to provide some sound bites for you in the room as far as what are we seeing around trends, where are we heading, what are some of the items coming to the forefront when it comes to payments from that perspective. The one thing that I'll say just before we get to questions, sorry, Robert, you can come on up, is just a quick plug. This coming Thursday, we have our T3 webinar. And it's going to be focused on how virtual card payments can be used within your B2B strategy and be able to help drive that electronification as well. So if you haven't seen that out through LinkedIn or through social media, Brian can get you that information for this Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, and while I'm thinking about it, email me that link and I'll send that out to all members so they can check that out. I've got questions, and I'm selfishly standing up, so I'm going to ask mine first. But hey, Brian, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. And so one question I got, if you back up a couple slides to the ESG slide, it was the original one that came up. So every single thing on the left side, I support. But I give pause. How that connects to my core mandate as the financial steward of the organization. I have a long list of things that I support personally that I don't normally inject into the business. So can you speak a little bit more? So I have reservations. So every single thing in the left I support personally, but have pause about injecting that into the business decisions that I make about which bank I lend with, or vendors that I use, customers that I allow to purchase my goods and services. So can you speak a little bit more about how ESG, and then that other slide where it talks about the core mandate of the CFO?
Sure, absolutely. And it's going to come down to what is your company's position? How do you want to drive that? Certain companies are going to bring this to more to the forefront than others from that standpoint. I think what we're seeing here is as we think about the footprint, the influence that we have as business owners, as business leaders, there are ways that we can help promote and provide, for, particularly when we think about, social investment or, and governance around that. And so, it's not, that you have to do it. Every company is going to want to run it a bit different, but for those that are focused on it and they want to, part of their core mandate, I think about, not every, company has a B Corp, and so, but, several companies out there do. They set up B Corps to make sure that, they're buying, they're either investing, in, impoverished countries or, underserved countries, or they're making sure that, the goods that they're procuring, are from companies that have, base level human standards, from that standpoint. So, don't have a definitive one way or the other. I would just say that, if your personal preferences and what you agree on, ESG align with what your company wants to drive and do, you do have the ability to help influence that and bring not only your personal values and to help drive your corporate mandate.
I got a question about the touchless payments. When I check out at Walmart or Kroger or Publix and use the cashless self-checkout, and I'm ringing up my groceries, like my apples, my bananas, I wonder, am I the only person actually paying for everything? And when I buy organic bananas, am I the only person picking the button for organic bananas that are way more expensive? So any data on increased shrinkage or theft with cashless payments in combination with self-checkout, and with inventory control, if there is increased shrinkage, any data on that as we move to maybe adopt cashless payments?
Yeah, I don't have specific stats on that front. What I will say and what we've been seeing is, companies have recognized actually reduced fraud, through the cashierless, process, and whether that's, and some of that is through, not to your specific example, but when you're ordering ahead of time and just walking in and picking it up, and I think and the other side I've seen is when companies think about the overhead and what's required to man those checkout lines versus what they may experience in shrinkage or, someone coding in something different than what they should. It hasn't been that significant, but I don't have the exact stats on what companies are saying. I can certainly reach that and send that back through Brian and send out.
I don't know if you can see this, but I made a big unhappy face when you said my car was going to be connected and I was going to start seeing advertisements as I'm driving along. Brian, I want you to talk to some people that Brian squared here at JP Morgan Chase. I hate that idea. So that's a negatory, sirs. If you could pass that up the chain, please.
Sure. I'll send it to the digital marketing companies. Yeah.
Any emerging leaders on the cashless payment, the Venmo, the PayPal, or Apple, Google? Anybody sort of emerging as a leader in this touchless payments sphere?
Yeah, I think certainly PayPal's a big one. Venmo, there's a new. I get emails every day. Hey, have you heard of this company? Have you heard of it? It's amazing the number of fintechs that are coming up into play. We have a sales team now focused in on that. E-commerce. Third-party payment processors, business embedded banking business, because there has just been tremendous growth. So I think right now we're seeing a lot of people, a lot of companies kind of, moving through. Certainly PayPal, who owns Venmo as well, is kind of the known leader. Square is a big one as well. But I think we'll see over the next couple of years, a lot of these, new companies that are coming into play. We'll start to see a true leader and survivor from that standpoint.
Just for the room, anybody accepting touchless or like these digital payments? My experience is all sort of traditional B2B. The government is not paying me in Venmo, right? They're cutting me like a check or wiring me to my pay. Anybody accepting touchless payments where they work or anything? Or worked anywhere? You were sort of nodding.
The rescue that my daughter runs, they take all kinds, Venmo, PayPal. It's actually quite interesting how many people actually prefer to pay that way. As long in the other, on the side note, I do taxes stuff for a couple nonprofits, and most of them, almost everything goes through PayPal. So
We use credit cards in the US, and we have some customers that pay through Alipay in China. China is much more advanced on the electronic payments than the US is.
And how do they tag the invoice or the bill that they're paying? Is that are they paying a specific invoice that says pay now? You click the button, so it's digitally tagged, so you know how to match it up.
We do now with the credit card side.
Okay.
Alipay, a lot of it is typically payment in advance because we deal with Chinese customers.
Okay. All right. This is an old school question, but I ask this every 5 years. Why does it take so long to send and receive a wire? Why is that? Why isn't that immediate? What are you people doing with my money for 24 hours? Serious question.
So, one, I think that may depend on your financial institution, but the other aspect of it, and sometimes with wires, and again, some of it could be depending on, all right, is that financial institution directly connected to the Fed? How do they go through, from that standpoint, wires as they go through sanctions, screening processes from that standpoint, and it could be the batch processing as well. So I know back on when I was on my corporate side, we did a couple thousand wires a day. They would go through within a few minutes, as long as we did it between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. Eastern from that standpoint. And I think that's part of what we're seeing with real-time payments, the drive for the faster payments. And when that mandate was originally issued back in 2013, the Fed had wrote a letter just saying, hey, U.S., we're the largest global economy, yet we have the most antiquated payment systems out there. And so that first brought same-day ACH. So where you could, send a transaction through NACHA or through the ACH payment rails and have it done same day, and then got us to the real-time payments, which then brought in the 24/7 and the near immediacy settlement in the transaction.
And I've told this story before, but I just want to mention, every time wires come up, I want to share that I've worked somewhere where a great employee fell victim to this, you think, completely obvious wire fraud scam, and you think it never happened to me. Well, it can. So and this employee, probably because the CEO and I travel a lot and we post things on LinkedIn, we were both about to board a plane, and the employee, the controller, got an email saying, hey, this is the CEO, I'm just about to board a plane, I need you to wire some money. And she emailed back, sure, what's the situation? And they were like, oh, I need you to wire $14,000, here's the number. Obviously, the CEO does not have the authority to email somebody and tell them to send $14,000, right? There's every policy and procedure, separation of duties exists and controls within the system. But she just thought she was making it happen and doing a solid and taking care of something. And so actually wired the money. And only because for some reason the final destination, they were wiring the money through someone else's SWIFT account, an intermediary. And when I landed, I saw the email stream and called the bank, and they got the money stopped at the intermediary. We got the money back, but it can happen. All right, so it's a good, when you get back, have a conversation. Hey, nobody has the authority to go outside the system. Even at me, if you think I need something real fast, right? The CEO, the big guy, big gal, doesn't have the authority. No matter what they say or email you, it's good to have a conversation. That's my duty for the day. I got a couple more questions if anybody else has one. You can stop me.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
So I had a very similar situation happen where an email came from the CEO, or it looked like it came from the CEO, they hacked the CEO's email. So when the coworker responded and said, hey, even created a new email, sent it back to the CEO and said, hey, I got this weird email from you, is it legit? The person responded back and said, oh yes, it's legit, because they had control of the email system. Pick up the phone. Every time.
Yeah, there's an article, it's either in this morning's or yesterday's Wall Street Journal, I can't remember, about someone who synthesized the CEO's voice.
Wow.
Yeah, it's getting high tech. They call it deep fakes, where you're faking a video or faking an audio. So I don't know what the answer is to that, because the common protocol is you call a known number to a known person and ask the question. And that's been somehow hijacked. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and you can't give the person a hard time. We've all made mistakes, but like, the CEO does not have the authority to ask for $15,000, any money, $5, right? Go get a second job, right? I'm not sending any for any reason. Where's my PO? Where's my invoice? I don't care. But people make mistakes, and there's also collusion. People are doing it on purpose, and you need to be looking for that. But it happened to me, and I never thought that would happen anywhere I work, and it totally happens. So I'm trying to save you the headache, because it's my responsibility. That is like my one job, is to make sure money doesn't leave the company by accident in a hurry. That wire went really quickly. I got a security question. Brian, any tips or tricks? Hey, when we got a checklist and we're talking about either accepting or sending these cashless payments, anything we should be looking at, say within our systems, to talk to our IT professionals about maybe a standard or a benchmark around security, so that our systems receiving and sending these payments are the best they can be. Any thoughts on security?
Yeah, so I think there's a few things. One, if you have registered users, they come in and they fully register from that standpoint, so you're able to collect additional data points. As you think about even leveraging some artificial intelligence, being able to identify patterns that may be happening from that perspective, and if there's something out of the ordinary. So hearing a lot of the conversation around fraud on like the artificial intelligence side is we'll watch and we'll track payments, and if something looks out of the ordinary, we will hold it up and call the company. Sometimes they get very mad at us for holding up the payment, but once they realize, oh, it wasn't correct, they're happy that we stopped to see through. I think just as you look at, if you're working with a fintech or working with another partner, to have that embedded as part of your processes. What type of information protocols are they able to go through? Outside of the debit front, certainly if you're collecting account holder information, working through on some sort of validation process, whether that's through an account owner authentication, where you're able to paying into the system to determine that is the right account owner. There's additional due diligence that can be received through that as well. Leveraging micro deposits from those standpoints. So I think there's also if you are on the debit side or the card side, there's ways you're able to identify if that's a prepaid card or if that's a debit card. And so you may want to be able to look at certain protocols and say, we're not able to make a payment to this prepaid card number. It needs to be tied to a bank account. Again, that's just personal preference, for what core companies want to be. But I would say, as you're looking at doing these, just making sure that you're working with your providers, particularly if your merchant processor providers, they can give you tips and insight. They can work through some of the validation as well. But certainly when you think about the online, the web payments, if you can have a way for that user to be able to register versus a guest checkout, that reduces your chance of loss as well.
Is this are these payments having an impact on the market share or the fees generated by the credit card companies like Visa, MasterCard, Amex? Is it even registering, and or the bank wire transfer fees? Is the amount of volume of these transactions growing large enough to register anywhere and give any of those, what I'm going to call competitors, pause or concern?
So no, I think, from a Visa and MasterCard perspective, while we've seen debit exceed credit in 2020 for the first time, they're leveraging, those debit rails. So they're just seeing additional growth, from that standpoint, as you think from a consumer perspective. From a B2B, perspective, certainly Visa and MasterCard continue to increase as more companies look to move to a virtual card offering. Amex is certainly a big player there as well. And when we think about cannibalization, excuse me, of wires, that volume continues to increase. And a lot of these payment systems, even from a real-time perspective, so if it's a push to card or push to wallet, or, real-time payment or a faster payment scheme within EMEA or APAC, those are country specific and located within those countries. So wires continue to be that main form of payment, to move things internationally. Certainly we're moving forward as we look at digital currency and leveraging blockchain to move funds internationally, not be beholden to local clearing times and cutoff times as you're looking to move money from New York to India, and from that standpoint. So wires, volume continues to remain strong, because a lot of these payments that are going through either through a merchant, a debit, a real-time payment are going to be, less than $100,000, from that perspective.
Brian, and for the room, anybody, you mentioned Paychecks and the speed of payment to employees. Brian, are you seeing any growing demand for people to be paid? What I'm going to say is either in sort of a non-traditional way or a non-traditional speed. Instead of maybe every other week, weekly. People getting paid quicker. I can't imagine anybody could be paid daily that was a W-2 employee. Maybe I'm wrong. That's part of the question. And then for the room, has anybody ever paid anybody via putting a credit on one of these accounts, one of these cashless touch accounts versus like a checking account? Is that a thing?
So I'll go first. So we are seeing the tremendous growth is really within the gig economy. We are seeing it within the hourly wage as well. With the daily payout or end of shift payout, the gig economy, the drivers, you think about the Grubhubs, the delivery or the food delivery drivers or the rideshare drivers, they're getting paid out 7-8 times a day, through the apps, from that standpoint. As far as wage access as well, for one of the things that we've entered into a partnership with with a company called Even that allows early wage access. So it allows, and it's integrated in with your HR and benefits payroll system, where that employee is able to, if they say their payday is going to be Friday, they can get access to their wages, their earned wages on Wednesday. From that perspective. So if they have a rent due or a car due or they need to buy groceries, it gives them access to it. So we are seeing growing trends across. The multiple payout, daily payout is more in the gig economy, hourly aspect. But then as we look at our traditional, whether it's salary or workers that are paid weekly or biweekly, there are fintechs coming into play to work with your HR and payroll systems on how can they gain early access to their wages. And then certainly it's working through for all your, tax and reporting from a W-2 perspective.
Anybody else seeing anything where they work? Yeah.
Look, can you clarify what that was about the early wage?
Yeah, a little more clarification about the early wage option or tool or service that you were talking about.
Sure. So that the company that we're working with is called Even, E-V-E-N, and what they do is that they are HR payroll software. They integrate in with your HR payroll software, and it's an app where an employee you can set how much they're able to advance on their paycheck from that standpoint. And so what happens is say, it's the end of the week, I get paid on Fridays, I'm supposed to earn $400. If, I took $200 on Tuesday, then it would net out. It would show as a deduction line on my, pay stub of early wage $200. And then, so my net pay on that payday would, reflect the change.
Yes, I was going more on what is the fee?
Oh, yeah. Do you know the cost if an employee elected to do that, Brian? What kind of fee do they have to pay, or the company have to pay to offer it?
Yeah, I can get that specific number for you. Some companies, they could put it to the employee where there's a small transaction fee for them to pay. Other companies just include it in as part of their benefits package as a way to help, with employee retention and allowing that early access. And so there's a subscription fee, revenue fee with contract with even on that front.
Last question for me is the software system that my company uses. These touchless payments, anything more sophisticated than a wire or an ACH is not native to the software system that we use. Anybody in the room, or Brian, do you have experience with some software systems for finance professionals that this is completely native, easy peasy, receiving or sending these kind of micro debits and credits?
So what I would say is, certainly and a lot of that is running through the merchant processing side. So if your ERP isn't set up or doesn't have API capabilities, or, being able to figure out how do we work this within our processes, within our AR, AP, processes. Certainly I'll tout, since I'm here, Chase Payment Tech, Chase Merchant Services, our merchant servicing arm. From that standpoint, they spend a significant amount of time working with companies on how to be able to, get this, embed these within your processes. And certainly there's a host of, merchant, processors out there as well.
All right, so I just took like 15 minutes asking all my questions selfishly. And anybody else from the room have any questions? Yes, Robert.
I was going to make a comment on the daily pay thing.
Yeah.
We're actually going to that in first quarter next year, and we're going through, at least it's proposed to go through a company called Rain, and their stated intent is to reduce the cost impact to the employee by leveraging the cost structure and not being predatory in any way toward the employee.
Wow. So
we're in the staffing business, obviously.
Oh, okay.
So we have 3,000 people basically on payroll any given week, and that's going to be, we expect it to be probably 30% adoption rate.
Wow, I have like a million questions. I can't even get my employees. These are professional, degreed engineers, scientists, logisticians. I can't get them to fill out their time frame.
So there's two ways to approach it. You can either do it based off of historical information, which the average Joe has got to work a couple of weeks before you get steady information before they'll be approved to work on that basis. Unless you're actually directly linked to time clock systems for all of your employees, you can't really do the true real-time approach.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. I hope I retire before that all be done. Any other questions? Yes, Ian.
I want to know what the industry is doing to address privacy concerns around all this data that they're collecting.
Privacy concerns, data collection. Brian, thoughts on that?
Yeah. Essentially, if you have a smartphone, you've kind of given up that. But no, it is a legitimate question as we think about, where does it end? And I think we've all had the example of, I talked to my wife about, hey, maybe we'll have maybe we should get a pink elephant, for the living room, and before I know it, we're getting served, ads for pink elephants. And just it does reach a point, and I think, Robert, your comment earlier about from integrated in with your vehicle and getting served ads and going through, there is, that balance between convenience and being able to have easy access for things that we want to do, and how much information are we giving up and what is being, mined from a data perspective. I think that's where we're starting to see, some of the, the pop-ups now when you go into a site or an app and saying, hey, do you consent for us to cross-share your information? I click no. I don't know if it actually works or not from that standpoint. But it is, just as we think about, all right, how much of that do we give up to how much of that do I want to protect? There's ways to do it. There's certainly the opportunity to opt out, and not utilize those payment methods, not utilize those marketplaces, not utilize those businesses. But there's the trade-off of, well, do you give up some of that convenience factor? There are times where I still like going into the store, picking up what I want, and just paying good hard cold cash for what I want to buy from that standpoint. So don't have a strong answer for you on it, other than I think we're going to continue to see data more and more. You're hearing a lot of discussions around data as a service. And data is the most important thing out there, and how do companies monetize that data based on what they've been able to collect to be able to improve their processes, or even build a company around it to sell off to others. Back 20, 30 years ago, it was okay. I could buy a list of names and addresses to send information to, and it's just so much more than that today, based on technology and electronification.
Well, let's give Brian a round of applause. Brian, this was awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to share his contact information, the presentation, a link to this recording if you want to check it out again or share it. Brian, I have a very prestigious Upstate CFO Council cup. Brian Anderson, you get nothing other than my regards. William is the Spread the Word winner in the back for liking, comments, and resharing my post on LinkedIn last month. And I have some swag up here that I'm going to give you. Come around before you leave. You too could be like William and win like cool stuff. And all I request is a like, a comment, and a share on LinkedIn after I post something. Thank you all, and everybody have a great day. Bye.